Welcome to The Explainer. Have you ever watched a world-class athlete just completely crumble under pressure and wondered, what just happened? Well, today, we're going to get into the science of it all, breaking down what's going on in an athlete's mind and body when everything is on the line.
So, what's our game plan? We're going to trace the evolution of this science, starting with the body's most basic activation system, and then build our way up to the really complex mental game that separates the good from the truly great.
All right, let's kick things off with the absolute foundation, a concept called arousal. Now, we're not just talking about being sleepy versus being awake. In sports psychology, arousal is the body's engine. It's the fundamental system that powers everything we do.
I mean, you know the feeling, right? Picture a sprinter in the blocks or a goalie facing a penalty kick. Your heart starts pounding, you're breathing faster. That's your body getting ready for some serious physical work. That feeling, that's arousal.
The key thing to get here is that arousal isn't an on or off switch. It's more like a dimmer. It's a whole spectrum, a continuum, that ranges from being in a deep, deep sleep all the way up to a state of complete and total panic.
So what's controlling that dimmer switch? Well, it's your autonomic nervous system. You can think of it like this. The sympathetic part is the gas pedal, kicking in that fight-or-flight response, getting you all revved up. And the parasympathetic part? That's the brake, calming everything back down. Okay, so if arousal is our body's engine, the big question becomes, how does that engine speed actually affect our performance? Well, let's take a look at the first big theory that tried to figure that out. Back in the day, around the 1960s, this really simple idea called drive theory was all the rage. And the logic was super straightforward. The more psyched up you are, the more revved up you get, the better you're going to perform. Simple, clean, makes sense, right?
And you can see why it was popular. It's intuitive. More energy should mean better results. But there's a huge, glaring problem with thinking of it as just a straight line going up and up. It just doesn't account for those times when an athlete is, well, too amped up.
Because we've all seen it happen. A world-class performer, someone at the absolute peak of their game, suddenly just chokes. They fall apart under the pressure. And drive theory, it had absolutely no way to explain that. So that really obvious flaw in drive theory pushed researchers to come up with something a little more sophisticated, something that suggested there isn't just more is better, but that there's a performance sweet spot. I mean, it's pretty clear that the best level of arousal depends on what you're doing. A weightlifter who needs a burst of explosive power is going to benefit from being super highly aroused, but an archer or a golfer lining up a putt, they need steady hands, intense focus. They're going to perform better in a much calmer state.
And that idea is captured perfectly by the inverted U theory. It basically says that for any task, your performance peaks at some moderate, optimal level of arousal. If you have too little, you're not engaged. But if you have too much, your performance starts to drop off. It's all about finding that perfect middle ground, that sweet spot.
But you know, even this model wasn't perfect. It was a big step forward for sure, but it still had some big limitations. It described what happens, but it didn't really explain why. And more importantly, it shows this nice, gentle curve, when we all know that when an athlete chokes, it feels less like a gentle slope and more like falling off a cliff. The theory was still missing a huge piece of the puzzle.
So what was missing? The mind. Researchers finally realized they had to stop looking just at the body's engine, the physical activation, and start looking at what was going on inside the athlete's head. They needed to understand the complex, messy experience of anxiety.
And this is a really major shift in our story. This is where we go from the simple idea of physical arousal into the much trickier and much more interesting world of anxiety. This distinction is absolutely critical. Arousal is just your heart racing. Anxiety is the story you tell yourself about your racing heart. It's the difference between interpreting that feeling as, I'm pumped up and ready to go, versus, oh no, I'm panicking. So what's really fascinating is that sports psychologists actually break anxiety down into two separate parts. You've got cognitive anxiety. That's the mental stuff, the worrying, the negative thoughts, that voice in your head. And then you have somatic anxiety. That's your awareness of the physical symptoms. You know, the butterflies in your stomach, the shaky hands, the racing heart.
And here's the real kicker. The mind and the body don't always move in lockstep. An athlete's mental worry, their cognitive anxiety, might build up for days and stay high right through the competition. But their physical symptoms, that racing heart, that might not spike until right before the starting gun, and then it can drop off super quickly once they actually start competing.
So this much deeper understanding of anxiety, with its separate mental and physical components, finally gives us the tools we need to explain those sudden, really dramatic collapses in performance.
First up is the individual zone of optimal functioning, or ISO-FOF model for short. And this basically proves that the sweet spot is not a one-size-fits-all deal. Nope. Every single athlete has their own personal, unique zone of anxiety where they perform at their absolute best. What works for one person could be a total disaster for somebody else.
And then, to finally explain why athletes sometimes choke so spectacularly, psychologists Hardy and Fozzi gave us the dramatic-sounding but incredibly powerful catastrophe theory.
Okay, this model is a total game changer. What it shows is that when your mental worry is low, your performance pretty much follows that gentle inverted U-curve we talked about. But when your mental worry is high, cranking up your physical arousal past a certain point doesn't just cause a little dip, it causes your performance to fall right off a cliff. That's the catastrophe.
All right, let's pull all of this together. We've gone from a super simple straight line to these really complex 3D models. So what's the big picture here for understanding how we perform?
So, what's the bottom line? Well, for one, the whole more is better idea is a complete myth. Peak performance is about understanding that delicate dance between your mind and your body. It's about finding your unique sweet spot and learning how to manage that high-wire act of physical arousal and mental worry.
And that really leaves us with one final thought. Mastering your performance isn't just about what you do in the gym or on the practice field, it's about what you do inside your own head. The real question is, now that you know the science, how are you going to master your inner game?